The war had been going on for 47 years, almost half a century of fighting, and the Vex Thrall Dominion still would not fall. Commander Teo stood in the dark command center of Station Praxis and looked at the holographic map of space. Red zones covered everything. Those red zones meant death, danger, and the territory of the enemy. The Vex Thrall were an insectoid species. They looked like giant bugs with hard outer shells and multiple limbs. They came from a planet far away in space, and they wanted to control the entire galaxy. They had already conquered 12 star systems. Billions of people lived under their rule now. Those people lived as slaves or workers or soldiers for the Vex Thrall Queen. 47 years of war. 47 years of fighting with the best soldiers from every species in the Allied Galaxy Council. The Council had tried everything. They had sent their best generals. They had built the strongest weapons. They had created new technologies and new strategies. Nothing worked. The Vex Thrall were too strong. They had a queen who lived in a massive hive, and this queen controlled everything. When the queen gave an order, millions of insectoid warriors obeyed instantly. They did not think about fear. They did not ask questions. They simply obeyed and fought and died for their queen. The human soldiers had always been different. Humans came from Earth, a planet where survival was not easy. Earth was dangerous. Wild animals hunted there. Diseases spread quickly. The weather could kill you. For thousands of years, humans had to fight to survive. They learned to be tough. They learned to push their bodies past normal limits. They learned to keep fighting even when they were hurt or tired or scared. This was why the Allied Galaxy Council decided to use humans in the final push against the Vex Thrall. When the Council realized they could not win the normal way, they turned to the Deathworlders. The humans were the last hope. Commander Teo pressed a button on his console. A message went out across Station Praxis. All the cadets who had been selected for the final mission should report to the training facility. They would receive their orders today. Min Kyung was in her small room when she heard the message. She was a cadet from Earth, originally from Korea. She was 22 years old and very good at fighting. She had a long scar on her jawline from a combat training exercise. The scar made her look tougher than she actually was, though she was plenty tough. She put on her military uniform quickly. The uniform was gray and blue, the colors of the Allied Galaxy Council. She checked her weapons. Then she walked down the metal corridors toward the training facility. Many other cadets were already there when she arrived. The facility was large and bright, with high ceilings and smooth walls. A lot of the cadets were human like her. But there were some other species, too. She saw a Teriac, a crystalline being who looked like a person made of clear glass with light inside. The Teriacs were very intelligent and logical. They solved problems in ways that humans could not. She also saw some Vontu, who were amphibious creatures from a water planet. They were good at engineering and building things. They could work underwater and in normal air. One of them nodded at her politely. Soo-jin was waiting near the back of the training facility. Soo-jin was Min Kyung's closest friend. She was also from Korea, but from a different region. Soo-jin was smaller than Min Kyung, not very tall, but she was incredibly fast and dangerous. In training, Soo-jin had beaten soldiers who were much bigger than her. She did it through speed and angles and perfect technique. The other cadets respected her greatly. "Today is the day," Soo-jin said as Min Kyung approached. "I can feel it. We finally get sent somewhere." Min Kyung nodded. "We finally do something real." Another human cadet joined them. This was Hyun-woo. He was also from Korea. Hyun-woo was tall and thin, and his mind was always working on problems. He could look at a situation and see solutions that other people missed. He was the kind of soldier who won battles without firing many shots, because he understood strategy and tactics better than almost anyone. "Did you hear the rumors?" Hyun-woo asked. "Some people are saying this is the final mission. The Council is sending us to do something that no other military force could do." That makes sense, Sujin said. Nothing else has worked. Why would they not try the Deathworlders? Before Min Kyung could reply, everyone in the facility became silent. Officer Hae-jun had entered the room. Hae-jun was a human officer, a veteran who had survived 15 major battles. His face was weathered and his body carried old scars. He had gray in his dark hair, which was unusual among soldiers who were usually younger. Hae-jun had survived so much because he was incredibly skilled and also incredibly smart about when to fight and when to retreat. Hae-jun walked to the center of the facility. He did not smile or wave. He just looked at all the cadets gathered there. "The war against the Vex Thrall is ending," he said, his voice loud and clear. "But not the way the Council wanted. We are losing. Every year we lose more territory. Every year the Vex Thrall take more worlds. Every year billions more people fall under their control. The military of the Alliance has failed. Our generals have failed. Our weapons have failed. Nothing has worked for 47 years. He paused and let this sink in. "Today, you are assigned to do what the entire galaxy could not do. You are going to infiltrate the Vex Thrall heartland. You will strike at the Queen Hive. You will destroy their command structure. You will finish a war that no one else could finish, and you will do it with a small team, in enemy territory, with limited resources." Min Kyung felt her heart beating faster. This was the real thing. This was not training anymore. "Your mission is impossible," Hae-jun continued. "Everyone knows that. But humans are different. You come from a death world. You have abilities that other species do not have. Your pain tolerance is higher. Your will to survive is stronger. Your minds work differently when you are in danger. The Council believes you can do this because you are the only ones who might actually survive." He named the members of the final team. Min Kyung, Sujin, and Hyun Woo were all selected, as she expected. He also named Ji-ho, a human cadet who was exceptional at learning languages. Humans could learn alien languages faster than any other species. Ji-ho was the fastest. He had already learned parts of 7 different alien languages. Dari was selected too. Dari was a medic, which seemed strange for a combat mission. But Dari had an amazing ability to keep people alive. She could perform medical procedures that should have been impossible. She had saved cadets who had been broken and bleeding and somehow fixed them with just emergency supplies. More names were called. A total of 12 cadets would go on this mission. 7 of them were human. The others were species chosen because of special skills. "You leave in 3 days," Hae-jun said. "You will take a stealth vessel. The vessel is cloaked and invisible to Vex Thrall detection. You will travel to the enemy space. You will complete your objectives. And you will return home heroes." He stopped talking. The facility was completely quiet. Then, slowly, the cadets began to understand what this meant. In 3 days, they would leave Station Praxis. They would go into space where the Vex Thrall ruled everything. They would probably die, but they might win the war. Min Kyung looked at Sujin. Sujin looked back. For a moment, no words were needed. They both understood. Their lives had just changed. Everything before this moment was preparation. Now the real test was about to begin. The stealth vessel moved through space like a ghost. It was invisible to the Vex Thrall sensors. The technology came from every different species in the Alliance. The Teriacs had contributed their cloaking systems. The Vontu had designed the engines. Humans had done the tactical planning. The ship was not very large, just enough to hold the 12-person team and supplies for a long mission. Min Kyung sat in the command center and watched the stars move past. The ship's walls were smooth and white, and they glowed with soft blue light. Around her, the team prepared for what came next. Ji-ho was studying intelligence reports about the Vex Thrall systems they would be entering. Hyun-woo was planning their route and possible escape paths. Sujin was checking weapons and maintaining combat equipment. Dari was in the medical section. She was organizing supplies, even though there was not much. In a combat situation, a medic never had enough supplies. She knew this well. Dari had served in 2 previous military operations. In both, she had seen soldiers hurt badly and had to keep them alive with almost nothing. She was good at it. Some people called it a gift. Dari called it necessity. "We are approaching the first Vex Thrall system," the pilot announced. The pilot was a Teriak, a crystalline being named Keshatar. Teriaks were excellent pilots because they could process information very quickly. Keshatar had done the approach 3 times in simulation, and he was confident he could do it in reality. Everyone in the command center became very focused. This was the first real moment. If the cloaking device did not work, they would be detected immediately, and if they were detected, the Vex Thrall would destroy them in minutes. They had no weapons powerful enough to fight Vex Thrall warships. The ship moved silently through space. On the view screen, Vex Thrall vessels appeared. They were long and horrible-looking, covered with sharp protrusions and strange designs. The ships moved with purpose, patrolling their space, guarding against attack. "Stay calm," Keshatar said. His voice was quiet and controlled. "We are passing through their scanner range now. The cloaking is holding. They do not see us." The seconds felt like hours. Min Kyung could feel her heart beating hard. Around her, the other cadets were equally tense. Hyunwoo had his hands pressed together. Soo-jin was very still, but her eyes were sharp and ready. Ji-ho was silent, his usual talkativeness gone. The Vex Thrall ship passed without noticing them. Then another ship passed, and another. They moved through the system like a needle through cloth, invisible and undetected. "We made it through the first system," Keshatar announced, "setting course for the next waypoint." A sound came from the communication system. It was not a normal transmission. It was urgent and loud and chaotic. Alarms. The alarms meant something had found them. "Cloaking is failing!" Keshatar shouted. "Multiple Vex Thrall signatures appearing on scan!" Min Kyung jumped to her feet. "How many?" "3 destroyer-class vessels," Keshatar replied. "They are converging on our position. They have locked weapons on us." This was the moment when a cadet became a soldier. This was the moment when training ended and real combat began. Min Kyung's mind became very clear and sharp. The fear did not go away, but it moved to the background. What mattered now was survival. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Full power to engines. We need to reach the next jump point." The ship shook violently. A Vex Thrall energy weapon had struck them. The lights flickered. Someone screamed briefly, then stopped. The sound meant nothing. They had no time for injury. "Shields at critical levels," Keshatar reported. "If we take another hit like that, we will lose hull integrity." Min Kyung made a decision that would define the mission. It was a decision that showed humans were different from other species. It was reckless and dangerous and probably insane, but it had a chance of working. "Drop all shields," she commanded. "Maximum power to weapons. Fire everything we have at the lead destroyer." The other officers in the command center looked at her. A Teriak second officer named Sixth Light hesitated. "Among the crystalline beings, you did not drop shields." Shields were defense. When you removed defense, you increased the chance of death. "Do it!" Min Kyung shouted. The shields dropped. Every weapon on the ship fired at once. The small human vessel, usually defenseless, suddenly became a shooting star of energy and missiles. It was brief and violent and overwhelming. The Vex Thrall destroyer was not expecting an attack from an undefended vessel. Its automated systems had a moment of confusion. That moment was enough. The lead destroyer exploded. Its shields had been designed to defend against gradual attacks, not a single overwhelming burst. The Vex Thrall crew had no time to respond. The vessel broke apart in a brilliant burst of light. "Jump point is in range," Keshatar called out. The ship twisted through space. Another Vex Thrall weapon struck them. This hit was different. It came from the side and tore into their hull. The ship's frame bent. Something inside exploded. Gravity shifted. Several people fell hard against walls and consoles. The ship jumped. Space twisted around them. For a moment there was nothing. No light, no sound, no sensation of direction. Then stars appeared again. Different stars, far away from the Vex Thrall patrol ships. "We are through," Keshatar said, his voice shaking slightly. "We lost shields completely. Engines at 40% power. Hull breach on levels 3 and 4. We are not going to make it to the next waypoint." Min Kyung looked at the star map. The nearest location was an asteroid base, abandoned many cycles ago. It was deep in Vex Thrall space, further into enemy territory than anyone wanted to go. "Plot a course for the asteroid base," she ordered. "Get us there. We will crash land if we have to." The ship limped through space toward the asteroid. Every moment, the crew expected more Vex Thrall ships to appear, but no ships came. Maybe the explosion had confused them. Maybe there were no other patrols in this area. Maybe luck was with them. The asteroid base appeared on the view screen. It was a dark place, covered in ice and dust. The base structures were mostly buried. The ship could not land gently. There was too much damage. Keshatar brought them down as smoothly as he could, but the impact still threw everyone forward. The ship crashed on its side. Warning lights flashed red. The air filled with dust and the smell of burning metal. Min Kyung pulled herself up from the floor. Her shoulder hurt where she had hit the console. Blood was coming from her forehead, but not much. She was alive. She checked the others. Sujin was already moving, checking weapons and preparing for action. Hyun Woo had a cut on his arm, but he was functional. Dari emerged from the medical section and immediately started assessing injuries. "Can we signal for help?" Min Kyung asked Keshatar. The Teriak looked at his damaged console. "No, the communication systems are destroyed. We are isolated." Min Kyung looked at Sujin. Then she looked at the star map showing Vex Thrall space all around them. The mission had almost killed them before it truly began. They had killed a Vex Thrall destroyer, which was an incredible achievement. But they were now crashed on an asteroid, deep in enemy territory, with broken communications and damaged ship. A normal military operation would order them to stay put and wait for rescue. But they were Deathworlders. They were humans. They did not think like that. "We continue the mission," Min Kyung said calmly. "We cannot get rescued. The Vex Thrall will search for survivors. If we stay here, we die. If we move forward, maybe we survive. We have supplies and we have weapons. We have each other. We go deeper into their territory. We gather intelligence. We find the hive. And we do what we came here to do." The room was silent for a moment. Then Sujin nodded. Hyunwoo nodded. Jiho and Dari nodded. The other cadets, human and otherwise, one by one agreed. They had trained for the impossible. Now they would attempt it. 3 months had passed since the crash landing on the asteroid. The team had become something that no one in the Alliance had ever seen before. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense anymore. They were ghosts. They were shadows moving through the Vex Thrall's own territory, striking from nowhere and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Min Kyung stood inside a Vex Thrall supply station and watched the insectoid workers move cargo. The workers were not true Vex Thrall. They were another species that the Dominion had enslaved. These were krill, tall beings with 3 eyes and exoskeletons that looked like hardened skin. The krill had been conquered by the Vex Thrall 5 years ago. Now they worked as laborers and soldiers for the insectoid empire. What the krill did not know was that Min Kyung was about to destroy their entire supply depot. She touched her communication device. "Status report," she said quietly. "Explosives are in place," came Sujin's voice. Sujin was on the roof of the depot. outside in the cold vacuum of space. She wore a suit that protected her from the emptiness. She had crawled across that empty space and placed charges on the power generators. When you give the word, I blow this place to nothing. Thermal systems are being rerouted, Jiho reported from another location. The communication systems of the depot were being taken over. All the messages that would go out asking for help would be false messages. The Vex Thrall Command would not know about this attack for days, maybe longer. Medical section is secure, Dari added. The injured krill are safe. We have room for at least 30 more if they want to come with us. Min Kyung had changed in these 3 months. She was harder now, colder. She made decisions about life and death without hesitation, because hesitation meant death for her team. She had ordered strikes that killed hundreds of enemies. She had seen friends suffer from radiation sickness and vacuum exposure and weapon wounds, and she had learned that the human ability to push forward, no matter the cost, was the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. "Fall back to the transit point," she ordered. "Sujin, blow the charges on my signal." The team moved like they had done this 100 times before, because they had done this 100 times before, or close to it. Over 3 months, they had hit 17 Vex Thrall positions. They had sabotaged supply lines. They had freed thousands of enslaved workers from the species that the Dominion controlled. With each action, they grew better at their work. When the entire team was clear, Min Kyung gave the signal. Sujin activated the charges. The supply depot exploded in brilliant light, tearing itself apart from the inside. The explosion was visible from space, and the debris would drift in the asteroid field, impossible to hide or recover. One supply depot gone. This meant that somewhere, a Vex Thrall military unit would not receive the ammunition it needed. Somewhere, soldiers would not have food. Somewhere, someone in the Vex Thrall fleet would wonder why supplies were not arriving. Everywhere in their empire, things were slowly breaking down. This was the strategy that Hyun Woo had developed. He understood that the Vex Thrall could not be defeated in direct combat. Their warriors were too strong, their numbers too great, their queen too powerful. But every system had weak points. Every supply line could be broken. Every communication could be intercepted and changed. Over time, an empire could collapse from inside, brought down by the actions of 12 individuals who refused to quit. Jiho had become something remarkable. Humans learned languages from other species, but Jiho learned them from the Vex Thrall themselves. He listened to their radio communications. He studied their written language on captured documents. Within the first week, he could understand basic commands. Within 3 months, he could hold simple conversations if he had to. He could predict what orders would be given. He could send false messages that seemed real. But more than learning the language, Jiho had learned the psychology of the Vex Thrall. He understood how they thought, he understood their response patterns, and he used this knowledge to spread confusion and doubt through their military command structure. A message would arrive saying that a supply shipment was delayed. Then another message would say it was on schedule. Then another would say it was never scheduled at all. The Vex Thrall command became uncertain. They questioned their own orders. Uncertainty led to mistakes, and mistakes led to deaths, and deaths led to failure. Dari's role had evolved in a way that surprised everyone. She was still a medic, still treating injuries and keeping people alive. But she had become something more. The team had freed thousands of enslaved aliens. Many of them wanted to fight back against the Vex Thrall. Dari had begun training them. She taught them human combat techniques. She showed them that you could fight even when you were tired, even when you were hurt, even when you thought you might lose. The revelation was staggering. No other species could be trained to fight like humans fought. Humans had a pain tolerance that was legendary. They could continue to function with injuries that would make other species collapse. They could push their bodies to extremes. They could keep moving forward even when they should have stopped. When Dari trained the freed slaves, she taught them to find these reserves of strength inside themselves. Su-Jin had become something that frightened the Vex Thrall. She conducted solo operations into enemy strongholds. She would go where 30 soldiers could not go. She would accomplish objectives that seemed impossible. She took on missions that probably would kill anyone else, and then she would return alive and ready for the next operation. Stories spread through the liberated colonies about the small human woman who could infiltrate entire bunkers alone. Some of the slaves started to call her the Ghost Killer. The name was accurate. Su-Jin moved through Vex Thrall positions like a ghost. She killed guards silently. She planted charges where they should not exist. She gathered intelligence that Hyun-woo used to plan the next operation. The Vex Thrall posted guards and created bunkers specifically designed to trap someone like her. She got through them anyway. Hyun-woo had become the brain of the entire operation. He looked at every report, every piece of intelligence, every success and failure. He saw patterns that others could not see. He identified weak points in the Vex Thrall supply network that seemed impossible to discover. He predicted what the enemy would do next and planned operations based on those predictions. He made it seem like the team was everywhere, doing 1,000 different things when it was really just 12 people striking at carefully chosen targets, and Min Kyung held them all together. She was the center that kept the operation functioning. She made the hard decisions. When a mission went wrong, she decided who would sacrifice themselves so that others could survive. She negotiated with the freed species. She planned the big strategies with Hyun-woo and the small tactics with Su-Jin. She treated Dari's medical supplies like they were gold. She listened to Jiho's intelligence reports and understood the importance of every detail. She was not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest, but she was the strongest at enduring, the fastest at learning, the smartest at keeping people together when everything was falling apart. But the Vex Thrall were not mindless insects. They began to understand that something was happening. They realized that their supply lines were under attack. They began to see patterns. They started to anticipate where the next strike would come. By month 4, the Vex Thrall had set a trap for Min Kyung's team. It was a supply shipment that seemed like a normal target, but it was a trap. The team almost died walking into it. Only because Su-Jin was naturally suspicious did they escape. They lost 2 of their members in that operation. Both were non-human cadets. Both died so that the humans could escape. That was when the Vex Thrall understood the full nature of the threat. These humans did not fear death like normal soldiers. They accepted death. They moved through danger knowing that they might not survive, and they did it anyway. The Queen of the Vex Thrall gave orders to consolidate forces. She began pulling her fleets inward, abandoning outer territories, moving toward her primary hive. The insectoid empire was gathering itself for a final confrontation. The Vex Thrall were no longer trying to win, they were trying to survive. And that was when Min Kyung and her team realized they had already won the most important victory of all. The Vex Thrall were now acting like the prey instead of the predator. The rebellion spread like fire across the Vex Thrall dominion. What began with Min Kyung and her small team sabotaging one supply depot had grown into a massive uprising. The enslaved species that Min Kyung had freed were rising against their masters. In the outer colonies, the Krill were taking control of their mining stations. The Kavan traders were refusing to transport supplies for the Vex Thrall military. The Threll engineers were shutting down factories that produced weapons. Everywhere in the Empire, things were stopping working. The Allied Galaxy Council saw their opportunity. For 47 years, they had fought directly against the Vex Thrall military. Every time they had lost. But now, with the Empire breaking down from inside, they launched their greatest offensive. Massive battle fleets emerged from jump points. Millions of soldiers from every species in the Alliance jumped into action. The war that had seemed eternal suddenly had momentum. The Vex Thrall, who had seemed unstoppable, suddenly looked mortal. But the Queen would not fall easily. She was ancient and vast, a creature that had ruled for 300 years. Her mind controlled millions of insectoid workers and thousands of warrior caste soldiers. She understood strategy. She understood that if she lost, she died, and she did not want to die. The queen ordered a massive counteroffensive. She took every warrior she could spare and threw them at the rebellion. She targeted Min Kyung's team specifically. She knew that the small group of humans was the center of everything. If she could eliminate them, maybe she could destroy the uprising from within. The attack came at a place called Station Forge of Shadows. It was a massive manufacturing complex built inside a planetoid. Inside the station, robots and enslaved workers had produced Vex Thrall warships for over 100 years. The station was the heartbeat of the Vex Thrall military production. If the station was destroyed, the Vex Thrall could not replace ships that were lost in combat. Hyun Woo had identified this location months ago. He had marked it as the critical point. If they could take this station, the Vex Thrall's ability to fight would slowly drain away. They would lose ships faster than they could build new ones. The Vex Thrall realized this too. They moved most of their remaining military strength to defend the station. When the Alliance forces attacked, they found not a factory but a fortress. Min Kyung stood in the command center of an Alliance cruiser and watched the battle develop on the view screen. Thousands of warriors were fighting. Vex Thrall ships exchanged fire with Alliance vessels. On the surface of the station, soldiers were fighting in corridors and in vast open chambers. The Vex Thrall warriors were terrifying to behold. They were huge creatures, 10 feet tall or more, covered in chitinous armor that turned most weapons aside. They had multiple limbs, each one ending in sharp claws or blades. Their exoskeletons were lined with weapons. When a Vex Thrall warrior fought, it was a storm of blades and projectiles and acid spit. Most species could not stand against them, but humans fought differently. A human warrior would see an enemy and move at angles that the Vex Thrall did not expect. Humans would absorb blows that should have killed them and keep fighting. Humans would use their opponent's size against them, moving past the blades and striking at points where the armor was weakest. Ji-ho took a spear through the chest. The spear went deep, but it missed his heart by luck or by his own slight movement. His eyes went wide with pain, but he did not fall. He grabbed the spear and pulled it deeper, closing the distance with the Vex Thrall warrior that held it. Then he used a knife to kill the creature. Only then did he collapse. Dari reached him quickly. She pulled the spear free, and the blood came with it, bright red and too much. Normal medics would have given up. The wound was too severe, but Dari was not a normal medic. She had learned that humans could survive things that should have killed them. She applied pressure. She used chemicals to stop the bleeding. She used stitches that would hold until proper treatment was possible. Then she wrapped him carefully and moved to the next wounded soldier. Soo-jin faced 4 Vex Thrall elite warriors in a corridor. These were not normal Vex Thrall soldiers. These were warriors that had been bred and trained specifically for combat. They were faster than normal warriors, stronger, more skilled. A normal human would have died in seconds, but Soo-jin was not normal. She was a Deathworlder. She was a human who had trained her entire life for combat. She moved like water, flowing around their attacks, finding the gaps between their limbs, striking with precision. She killed the first warrior by moving past its guard and striking its neck joint, the one point where armor did not fully protect. The second warrior learned from this mistake and kept its neck more protected. Soo-jin adapted. She changed her attack and targeted the areas where the legs connected to the body. When a Vex Thrall could not support its own weight, it could not fight. The third warrior was smarter. It tried to use its superior reach and strength to pin her against the wall. If it succeeded, it would crush her. But Soo-jin had trained for this. She relaxed her body and let the warrior push her back. Then, at the moment of contact, she twisted and moved. The warrior's momentum carried it past her and straight into the wall. The impact cracked its shell. The fourth warrior saw what was happening to the others. It made the decision to retreat. The Vex Thrall were logical creatures. A warrior could move to a location where it could win, but Su Jin would not let it retreat. She tackled it from behind and finished it with a knife strike to the base of the skull where a nerve cluster was located. When the fighting in that corridor ended, 4 Vex Thrall elite warriors lay dead. Su Jin was bleeding from dozens of cuts. Her armor was damaged and torn, but she was alive. Min Kyung reached the command center of the station. This was where the Vex Thrall officers coordinated all the defense. Getting here had cost the lives of 3 human soldiers and 2 allied warriors. The room was filled with Vex Thrall command staff, creatures dedicated to running the military of the Dominion. Min Kyung ordered her remaining fighters to take the room. They did. The fighting was brief and brutal. When it ended, all the Vex Thrall command staff were dead, and 7 human soldiers were dead or dying. But the station was in Alliance hands. The Vex Thrall realized what was happening. Station Forge of Shadows was lost. Their military production was crippled. They could build new ships, but slowly, much more slowly than before. The balance had shifted. The Alliance could now lose ships and replace them. The Vex Thrall could not. Within days, more systems fell to the Alliance. Within a week, half of the Vex Thrall outer territory was liberated. The Queen, desperate and afraid, began a purge of her own military, killing generals that she believed had failed her. This only made things worse. Without skilled military leaders, the Vex Thrall defense became less organized. Min Kyung received a message from Commander Teo. It was simple and direct. The Queen has retreated to her primary hive. All forces are consolidating there. This is your moment. This is what you were trained for. Go finish this. The hive was the center of the Vex Thrall Empire. It was a massive structure, both ship and fortress, capable of supporting life for 1 million creatures. The Queen herself lived at the center of the hive, embedded in biological matter, merged with the structure so completely that she and the hive were one organism. Min Kyung looked at her remaining team: Su Jin, wounded but ready; Hyun Woo, exhausted but focused; Dari, tending to the last of the injured; Ji-ho, recovering from his spear wound but able to walk; 3 other human cadets, 1 Teriak, 1 Vontu engineer. They had started with 12. Now they were 8. But the 8 were enough. They had to be enough, because the Queen was waiting, and the final battle was about to begin. The primary hive hung in space like a moon. It was enormous, kilometers in length, covered in strange organic protrusions and defensive weapons. The Vex Thrall had poured everything they had into protecting this place. It was their capital. It was their culture center. It was where the Queen lived, and the Queen was the soul of the entire species. The Alliance fleet approached cautiously. The hive had weapons that could destroy capital ships in single strikes. But the weapons seemed slow to activate, slow to respond. The Queen's paranoia had led her to kill many of the officers who commanded those weapons. The replacements were less skilled. Min Kyung's assault team did not go in on the main fleet. They went in small drop ships, barely more than shuttles, moving fast and invisible against the massive bombardment happening on the other side of the hive. Hyun Woo had planned the route. It took them through parts of the hive that intelligence suggested had lighter defenses. The dropships landed in a cargo bay. The moment they touched the ground, the team moved. There was no time for hesitation. The Vex Thrall would detect them eventually. They needed to reach the inner chambers before that happened. Dari stayed in the landing zone to set up a medical position. She knew she would not be able to keep up with the team as they moved deeper, but she set up supplies and activated a beacon. Any wounded that made it back to this point would receive treatment. Dari had learned in these months that sometimes the most important thing a medic could do was survive and be ready. She had lost count of how many soldiers she had saved in this small medical area. The others moved deeper into the hive. The corridors were organic, looking like they were grown rather than built. The walls were moist and warm. Strange chemical smells filled the air. The Vex Thrall hive was as much a living organism as the Vex Thrall themselves. It breathed. It had fluids that moved through it like blood. It could feel damage and respond to threats. Jiho heard the alarms before anyone else. His enhanced hearing, trained over months of listening to alien communications, picked up the sound. The hive was waking up. The Queen knew intruders were inside. Vex Thrall warriors began to emerge from passages in the walls. These were not common soldiers. These were members of the Royal Guard, creatures that had been specially bred for combat. They were larger than normal warriors, faster, stronger, covered in armor that looked impossible to penetrate. Sujin met them head-on. She used the environment against them, moving through tight passages where the Vex Thrall's size became a disadvantage. She used their own force against them, making them crash into walls and each other. She was bleeding from new wounds, but she was also laughing, a wild sound that terrified the alien warriors. Humans could enjoy combat. The Vex Thrall could not understand this. Hyunwoo was navigating the interior of the hive, reading the organic passages like they were maps. He understood that the hive had a logic to it, a biological logic. Things flowed from the outer edges toward the center where the Queen lived. If they followed the flow, they would reach her. Jiho was communicating with the other teams throughout the hive. The Alliance had sent multiple assault teams simultaneously to maximize confusion. Some teams were attacking the weapons positions. Some were destroying the production facilities where new warriors were grown. Some were cutting the hive's connection to its external defenses. Jiho coordinated all of this, making sure they did not interfere with each other. The human cadets fought with a desperation that even they had not known they possessed. One of them, a young soldier named Dae Sung, took a Vex Thrall blade through his shoulder. The blade was long and sharp and should have killed him instantly. But Dae Sung grabbed the blade with his bare hand, pulled himself closer to the Vex Thrall that held it, and killed the creature with a knife to what looked like a nerve cluster. Then he pulled the blade out of his own shoulder, dropped it, and kept moving. Blood was pouring from the wound, but he would not stop. This was Deathworld behavior. This was what it meant to be human. Hyunwoo led them to a massive chamber. It was circular and vast, hundreds of meters across. At the center, barely visible in the distance, was the Queen. She was enormous, 200 meters in length, maybe more. Her body was pale white and looked soft, but Min Kyung knew that soft exterior contained muscle and power beyond imagining. The Queen had spent 300 years accumulating power. She had personally overseen the conquest of a dozen star systems. Her mind was the most powerful intelligence in the Vex Thrall Dominion. The Queen's massive body turned to face the intruders. Her multiple eyes, as big as windows, fixed on Min Kyung. The insectoid creature was dying. Her own subordinates had started a purge of the military leadership. Her favorite commanders were dead. Her production facilities were destroyed. Her outer territories were liberated. The empire was crumbling. But the Queen was not dead yet. She raised one of her front limbs, a limb as long as a building. She was not fast anymore, not with such a massive body. But she did not need to be fast. She just needed to crush the small human warriors. She swung the limb down like a hammer. Sujin pulled Min Kyung out of the way. The limb crashed into the ground where they had been standing. The impact cracked the organic floor, splitting it. The Queen was using so much force that it was damaging her own hive. Min Kyung made a decision. She activated the self-destruct on her suit. The device would create an explosion that would kill her in the explosion but would also create a massive blast. It was a suicide move. It was the human way of saying, I will rather die than let you live. But Min Kyung did not activate it to die. She activated it as a statement. The Queen saw what the human was doing and understood. The human was willing to die to prevent the Queen from surviving. That was something the Vex thrall could not comprehend. The Queen had lived 300 years. She did not want to die, even if it meant fighting a creature that refused to be killed. In that moment of hesitation, Hyunwoo shouted the evacuation order. Min Kyung ran, Sujin ran, Jiho ran. The Teriak and the other cadets ran. They moved through the hive toward the landing zone. Behind them, the Queen began to move, but slowly, painfully. The hive around them started to collapse. The destruction the Queen's own thrashing had caused was bringing down the internal structure. Dairy saw them coming and activated the medical beacon. The dropships appeared at the landing zone. Everyone that made it to the area jumped aboard. The ships fired their engines and lifted off. The primary hive exploded from the inside. The death of the Queen had caused a cascade of failure. Her body, embedded in the hive's center, contained the nerve clusters that controlled everything. When she died or was dying, the hive began to fail. Reactors exploded, organic structures collapsed, the entire massive station unraveled. The hive that had been the center of the Vex thrall dominion, the symbol of their power and their empire, fell apart in a brilliant display of destruction. The explosion was visible from across the system. Every being in the Vex thrall-controlled space saw it. Every being in the Alliance-controlled space saw it. The Empire had fallen. The surviving Vex thrall, disorganized and leaderless, surrendered within days. Isolated colonies gave up without fighting. The military structure collapsed. The insectoid species that had once seemed unstoppable agreed to disarm and accept reparations for the species they had conquered and enslaved. What should have taken decades of warfare had taken 18 months. Min Kyung's small team of 12, 8 of whom had survived to the end, had done what 47 years of galactic warfare could not do. They had ended the war,